part of the problem is some men don't know themselves.
Yeah.
So they're looking for feedback, something to bounce off of, and as a reflection to what they're putting out there in the world. And they choose women for a lot of reasons. One, it tends to be safer, right?
Yeah.
In theory, right?
It feels good, right?
Yeah. Well,
Women validating you, there's nothing wrong with that.
if it's a positive validation.
Correct.
I think a lot of guys get negative ones too,
Yeah,
right? And so I think the guys pick women and because it feels better, it's safer, and that's what they're used to. They're looking for, hey, am I doing a good job?
Yeah.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the TPM Show. Today we are greeted by the one and only master coach himself, Mark Smith. So guys, today you want to stick around because Mark and I are going to delve into a topic that comes up often. In fact, we are coming off the back of the Alpha Rising, a transformational experience that we have here right at the TPM Ranch. In case you don't know, we have a ranch right in Sisters, Oregon, Central Oregon. It's 106 acres, excuse me. And we had that transformational event here. Mark flew all the way across the world to be here and to lead these men through the other side. Mark, thanks so much for being here.
Always a pleasure, Doug. You know that.
Yeah, well, it's my pleasure as well. So one of the things that actually came up at the Alpha Rising for one of the guys, and you and I see this quite often, is this idea of needing validation from women.
Isn't it an interesting one? It's like, we create a relationship wherein we initially validate her because we've been chasing her and landing her, so to speak. And then a lot of guys forget to romance and lead. And then they end up in a position where they feel their needs are not being met and then look to their spouses for validation.
Yeah. One of the guys I was talking to recently, when we broke it down, the scenario was he would come to his partner often, right? Trying to make sure, am I a good husband? Am I a good father? Am I a good man? Now, he wasn't thinking about this at the forefront of his mind, but that's what he was doing.
Yeah.
And then when we delved a little bit deeper, Mark, he realized he was doing this before the marriage by dating different women, trying to seek that I'm good enough. And I go, well, think about now. Do you do this at work? He's like, oh my gosh, I do this. I do this with, and I'm making up the names, Sally in operations. I do this with Susie, that's over in sales.
Yeah.
And it's kind of this idea of being the good boy and getting the cookie, so to speak, or the award for being good. But it doesn't have to be being good. It's just getting validation and attention from women.
Well, this could go a number of ways, couldn't it?
It certainly can.
So a lot of guys are brought up primarily by their mothers,
Yes.
dads at work or absent or from divorced families. And so they've only had validation from women, moms, sisters in many cases. The other aspect is that, when it comes to women being what can we call it? The antithesis to the masculine. It's like the opposite energy. So I think what happens for a lot of guys is it's around being in their heads and being in a masculine environment. There's a lack. There's a need to fill the cup from feminine energy.
Yeah, I definitely think that if we go back for a second to the idea of the mom.
Yeah.
Right. And even if the dad was around, like you think generationally, a lot of the older generations, where we look back, communication of a feelings wasn't a thing.
No.
Like I wasn't brought up, encouraged to communicate my feelings really in a deep way. And I was raised by my dad. I had two brothers, as you know, that were much older than me. So to me, you just didn't stop and do that. I was told I was loved, but the feminine, to your point, the mother is much more nurturing.
Yeah.
And I think what happens, in fact, I just got, before we recorded this, I was on somebody else's show and they were interviewing me. And off camera, I don't want to give anything away for this gentleman, but off camera, the guy was sharing to me, we're talking about validation. And this idea of seeking this validation from women, from the feminine, and really trying to go, hey, am I good enough? And when we aren't sure of ourselves as grounded men on who we are to the core essence, the good and the bad. And you got to accept both of those things. When you don't accept both of those, you open yourself for a need for an outside influence or person to tell you who you are and are you doing good in the world. And oftentimes men select women.
So what you're saying is that unless we purely and truthfully accept ourselves as we are, we're going to be looking to women, sport, money, whatever, for validation.
Absolutely. I would say most men, and this is going to sound weird, I'm trying to think of how I would receive this as a listener, but I think most men don't know who they really are.
Yeah.
They haven't taken the time to be with themselves in solitude, to do the work. And not saying anybody, maybe nobody ever truly knows who they are, but certainly someone like yourself has peeled back that onion time and time and time again. You get more closer to the core.
Yeah.
And when you get there, you get into something that we call grounded masculinity, right? You're grounded in your masculine and you know who you are. And so if I were to go to you, Mark, and say, well, Mark, you're a lousy husband, you would just laugh because right? Because you know you're a great husband. Are you perfect? I don't know. Probably not. I'm not either. But it doesn't affect you because you don't need validation in that area of your life because you know you are at peace with where you are. Doesn't mean you're not trying to get better in an area, but you're not seeking outside validation from your partner or anybody else to complete you. And I think part of the problem is some men don't know themselves.
Yeah.
So they're looking for feedback, something to bounce off of, and as a reflection to what they're putting out there in the world. And they choose women for a lot of reasons. One, it tends to be safer, right?
Yeah.
In theory, right?
It feels good, right?
Yeah. Well,
Women validating you, there's nothing wrong with that.
if it's a positive validation.
Correct.
I think a lot of guys get negative ones too,
Yeah,
right? And so I think the guys pick women and because it feels better, it's safer, and that's what they're used to. They're looking for, hey, am I doing a good job?
Yeah. And you said it, peeling back the layers and getting to know ourselves can be a lengthy journey. In my experience, it's been quite many years. So what can the guys do who haven't got to peel the layers yet, but still want the wins in terms of validation? And my answer to that question would be around skill drills. One of the practices we have at TPM is hidden motives, standard, no, is engaged indifference. So being willing to engage, opening our hearts, being willing to surrender some of our protective layers to see what happens. A lot of guys resist that because of, well, I'm fearful of getting hurt, but I want the validation, but I'm closing myself off. So there's a challenge there. They can't get the validation because they're shut and they're getting negative validation. We call them safety tests.
Yeah.
Right. So there's that situation where if I keep practicing engaged indifference, so I'm indifferent to the fact that she can hurt me or allow that to happen and don't take it personally and still remain engaged, that can be a really great practice to getting into a situation where there is some validation from a woman and potentially over time, less need for it.
It's so very true. When you think about engaged indifference, what I'm wondering as a listener, when we hear this all the time, do guys know how to get into their heart to be vulnerable?
Just had that on an activation group call. Yeah. So what I had one of the guys do was put both of his hands on his heart and just close his eyes and breathe. And imagine as he breathes that he can breathe into his heart as you would with your lungs. So he breathes in and expands his heart. And to get in touch with that, because most guys that I work with initially don't even know. The one guy had trouble even finding his heartbeat. I go straight there. I know where my heart is. I can feel it before I put my hands there. Lots of guys aren't even aware of their heart beating in the chest.
Yeah, well, there's that old adage, the longest journey a man takes are the 6 inches between his head and his heart.
Yeah.
You know? Now, the quickest thing I could tell a guy to do, and this is not self-serving, is go to an alpha reset.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that'll just rip you open right away. Yeah. It's a very transformational experience. There's a reason we have hundreds of testimonials on the alpha reset that guys saying the same thing, yet guys don't talk about the actual processes there because they become so, I don't want to use the word sacred, but it's kind of what it is.
Yeah.
And guys come out of there not needing validation from their wives or their spouses because the validation now lies within inside themselves. And when you can get to that point where you can look the man in the eyes that's in the mirror staring back at you, and you feel good about him, right? Doesn't mean, again, I want to make sure guys understand, doesn't mean he's perfect.
No.
Right? But he's perfectly imperfect in his journey.
Yeah.
You no longer have to start chasing your wife to make sure everything's okay. Are you okay, honey? Is everything okay? Are you happy? Are you not happy? Am I being good? Am I doing the right things? Or trying to get a body count by sleeping with a lot of women.
Yep.
Just so you can validate yourself. Now, I get it. There's guys out there that are doing that because it's fun for them. But a lot of guys will use that as an excuse because really what they're seeking is, am I good enough?
Yeah. Yeah, it's an incredible and very deep subject, isn't it? Because it goes into the psyche and the psychology.
Yeah.
I think what I got out of what you just said is that if I can find, or if our clients can find a way as men to discover I am actually good enough, regardless of what anybody else says or does around me, getting to that point of groundedness gives such a huge boost to confidence. And I think a lot of guys create a disconnect in their minds between confidence and arrogance. They've been told, potentially having been brought up, maybe their older brothers, maybe even a guy said to me earlier on today, well, mum used to criticize me and have me playing small, essentially. So if I'm not good enough for mum, then I have to prove I'm good enough for my wife. And so they don't grow up with a concept of, I'm good enough exactly as I am. Therefore, I don't have to prove anything.
You said, talk about groundedness. Tell us a little bit about what does it look like for a man to be grounded?
Interesting question, because you said, what does it look like? I could stand up and I could give you a demo.
Well, and I agree. And I think you are a great example of a grounded man.
Thank you.
Right. So if you were to describe what it does look like for a man to be grounded, not just from a visual standpoint, but what does it look like internally? What does it feel like for that person? Like how I could just picture the old me, right? Well, Doug 1.0 out there listening and going, okay, this makes sense, guys. But grounded, like what the heck are they talking about?
Yeah.
I don't know what grounded means. Stop using this lingo. Like, what does it mean? Well, maybe ask a different way. What does grounded mean to you?
I'll answer that question using an anecdote. So when I'm working on something new, a new process, something I'm not sure of, new relationship, whatever it happens to be, what will typically happen is that I'll want to get it right because of my relationship with my father, quite frankly. Right? It came from school. You got to get it right.
Yeah.
And then as a consequence of that, I'm in my head. So I'm not grounded because I'm connected to thinking about what needs to happen, what isn't happening, where's the gap, what's the next process, where do I fit into the process, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not grounded because essentially it ends up being headless chicken energy.
Yeah.
Right? Uncertainty, looking for validation. Where next? Where do I belong? Where do I stand? All of those things. Whereas now, for example, running an alpha reset, I've run many alpha resets with you, got past that headless chicken kind of, oh, this is all new, how do I get it right, to I trust the process. I know that it will be imperfect. I know that I will always give it my best. And I know that I'm the right man for the job. So knowing those things gives me the confidence to be grounded. And the practice I use to be grounded is the universal breath, right?
Yeah.
What we came into the world with, and to get back to the breath and to be able to breathe deeply. I found, Doug, with breath work, and we've done amazing breath work in TPM. I love your breath work. At the Alpha Rising, we had another experience. I've been able to breathe deeper. When I watch my father, he breathes shallow into his chest, and I've had him breathe into his stomach, and it's like a new thing for him. And it's like, that doesn't feel natural. But guess what? When he breathes into his lower belly, when he breathes into his whole body, he becomes and sounds and feels more grounded. So yeah, I think that's what it's down to for me.
So yeah, I want to relate back what I'm hearing from you and what I see in you, if I can.
Okay.
Is what I find is when you are authentically Mark and you feel really comfortable with yourself, which I think you feel maybe 99% of the time. I'm sure there's a percentage that's in there that you don't. And you do what you say, you just trust the process, you get into a flow state. And grounded to me means you're grounded, meaning you're rooted. And you can imagine your feet have roots, in my visual right now. And people can't push you over emotionally or psychologically because you're so stable within who you are.
Yeah.
And you're bringing that into what you do to serve the men or what you're doing at home, and we all have different shades of ourselves, right? The jokester, the comedian, the serious guy, all of those things.
Yeah.
And when you're grounded, you can allow all those colors of the palette to come out without feeling anxious, needy, vulnerable. I mean, you still feel vulnerability, right? In that state, but you feel secure vulnerability, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. I love that. And the vulnerability that I feel from a grounded state is openness and loving and willingness because of the roots allowing me to go there and be flexible. Whereas if I'm ungrounded and feel vulnerable, feels like an attack.
Yes.
Right? And I think that's what happens with a lot of guys. They go, if I'm vulnerable, I'm being attacked, I could get hurt, it knocks me over. And then I'm afraid of my anger or response because I'm going to act out, or I'm going to run away, or I'm going to yell, or I'm going to be ashamed or whatever. So the rooted groundedness that we see in a lot of guys in the brotherhood is a huge key factor to not having to seek externally for validation.
Yeah, that's so true. And you just brought up something for me is, so the Alpha Reset, for those that are new to the show, it's a 4-day transformational experience, unlike anything I've ever experienced. Absolutely love it. And guys, if you're interested, you going won't change my life, but it will definitely change yours. And during that, I would say at the beginning, 50% of the men say that they don't trust other people.
Yep.
At the end of that, 100% of the men have trust at different levels, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's part of what, the vulnerability and being grounded is. Because when I'm not grounded, or I find myself shaken, I'm not in that state for whatever reason, trust issues can come up with for me because I'm not trusting in myself and my own stability.
Yeah.
When you are grounded, I know we're going slightly off topic, but that's great. When you are grounded, it's harder for someone to hurt you because you're so secure with yourself. Someone could physically hurt you. Someone could steal from you theoretically, but it doesn't seem to happen to guys when they're in a grounded state. They don't become, first of all, they don't think of themselves as a victim. Thus, they don't become a victim.
Yeah.
Right? Or a perpetrator for that matter.
Yep.
And so they're out of that energy altogether, which as coaches, we have to go to a quote vulnerable state in order to empathize, relate, and get the guys through their processes. And if we're not grounded, we run the fact of, one, everybody could tell. Two, we could also get emotionally hurt during a process or an exercise.
Yeah, so true. What would you say would be then, having had this conversation, the key factors for men to know and realize and potentially practice in order to not seek validation?
Yeah, okay, I've got a couple more hours for this. I think one of the big ones that's coming up to me right now, Mark, is one is realize you're not as unique as you think you are. That's one. We probably have more commonalities than not.
Yeah.
Two is you're not as tricky as you think you are, and people can see past your mask.
I told guys that this very day.
And it's so funny because everybody thinks they're pulling the wool over everybody else's eyes.
Right.
And you're not, right? We can all see it, guys. Some of us can see it better than others, but we can all see it or feel or something's up.
Yeah.
Right? That's why sometimes people don't pass the sniff test or you're having a gut check. Like there's something not adding up. So that's the two. So once you've got that and you realize, well, crap, everybody already knows this stuff I'm hiding about me, you can stop hiding it, one.
Yeah.
But I'll give one more that I think is super important is own that side of you, own your imperfections, right? When you own your imperfections, one, people can't use it against you. Two, you can't use it against you. Three is when you take the darkness and you put it into the light, it dissipates much faster. You don't have to hold on to it. And when you hold on to it and you try to hide it, whatever may be you're going through, guys, when you try to hide it, it just clings on to you more.
Yep.
kind of like, don't think about the pink elephant. Don't think about any pink elephants. No pink elephants in your mind. Don't think about any pink elephants at all.
Mine even has an umbrella.
Of course it does.
Pink elephant singing in the rain.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Doug.
Exactly. That's a gift for you. Yeah, that's what it is for me. And I think you talked about practices. You did talk about practices.
Yeah.
We teach the guys right away the alpha rise and shine.
Yeah.
And a lot of guys will say, well, maybe is that just a morning routine? Yes and no. It's a morning routine that's specifically designed for men that find themselves in this situation. But we also have the alpha decompression, which you don't hear people talk about.
So much. Yeah.
And not as much. Yeah, excuse me. And so I think adding those two practices is a good way for a guy to stop seeking validation because he'll start to get to know himself better.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like I said, this conversation can go anywhere from psychology to physiology.
Sure.
The decompression is linked to groundedness, linked to not needing validation because of the groundedness, I think is an important one. And a lot of guys, including, I had a group this morning a couple of guys saying, I was just decompressing to tick the box, to literally get my COIL score, my chart of intentional living score going in the right direction. And it's absolutely not about that. It's about changing your state. So if you think about setting up for a job, be it setting up a boxing ring for a boxing match, the ring has got to be solid. It's got to have all the right pieces in places. The ropes have to have the right tension, all of that sort of stuff. Everything has to be set up and right. The lighting, access, all of that stuff.
Hey guys, sorry to interrupt this episode, but the reality is if you are watching or listening to this right now, then you are looking to better yourself. And I applaud you. You're one of my people. And I want to give you the opportunity of taking massive action. So if you haven't joined the activation method yet, it's our flagship program. Do what thousands of other businessmen just like you have done and take action. Be one of the 1%ers that actually does the work and takes action. There'll be a link in the description that'll take you right to a page that'll just give you more information. There is no obligation. Just go check it out and see if it's a good fit for you. All right, let's get back to this episode.
If that setup is right and if the foundation is right, then there's no need for any concern about what people think or, what will happen in the future, because there's that grounded state which comes from within. Now, going back to what I said earlier around a lot of guys being brought up by women, a lot of what has happened and why men need validation externally is because they haven't had that initial secure base of loving, connected, openly affectionate parents who they feel safe with. Because if you've got that from mom and from dad, you've got a secure base. So you don't need validation externally. But if one is missing, or one is missing and one is toxic, which is what happened with my children, I was absent, and my children's mother was horrendous towards them in certain areas, certain ways. My judgment. So they've had to work, and I'm still working with them on creating their secure bases, So it's never too late. That's the good news.
Oh, it's a great news. We've had men come through the program that are in their late 60s, early 70s, that have found what they were looking for probably their entire life, or at least their adult life.
Yeah.
So it's never too late. And to your point, when I'm just listening to your story, I'm thinking, of course, about my story, as we tend to do. And thinking about some of the men recently that you and I both worked with at the Alpha Rising and at other events that we've done that have had a desire to seek validation from the feminine and what that is. And when I look at that, it does come from, when I look at least three of the guys that I'm thinking of, it does come back from a core issue in childhood with their mother. And wanting to get it from their mom, and something was missing there. Alcoholism, just a mom who was going through a tough time, but as a kid, you don't know that. You don't get that. It took me till I was like 21 to realize my parents were just normal people doing the best they could. And so I think we have to go back and rewrite those stories, or at least investigate those stories from childhood. You know, it's the kind of the analogy, Mark, I use when I think about this is my kids are 4 and 7. And so the monster in the closet is very real to them.
Yeah.
Right. So, and if they don't have a logical answer, they'll just start creating one, and they'll create a story. And if it's not checked, so to speak, then that story will just run as fact in the back of their mind. And as they grow up, they'll just continue because we don't go back and look at those old stories.
That, I think, is a great segue into if men want to live without having to seek validation externally, and especially from women, there's a huge amount of benefit in whether it be through journaling, whether it be through feedback from other men, accountability. It's great. Getting mirror work done from the perspective of feedback. So, you know, what do you really think of me? How am I doing in this particular scenario and situation? Give me some masculine feedback so that I don't need that feedback from the feminine, because I've already had a safety check. You know, am I good in these areas? And that's what often happens on our activation calls. The guys say, well, you know, I've posted this and I'm feeling this, or I'm not going there. And then, I mean, what I do is I say, we had a guy this morning expressing something. And I said, how many other guys feel this? And the whole room raised their hands. And for the first time, he realized, I'm not the only one who, you know, needs her, because he was saying his wife happens to be away from the home and he couldn't sleep because he wasn't getting a message back from her. And then he goes into stories about, you know, is she okay, or is she whatever?
Yeah.
And so my feedback to him was, write down what you feel, why you feel that way, why you need that validation, and what does it do for you when you have that validation, and what could you validate yourself for? How can you create validation for yourself? So again, hitting the singles, practices, skill drills. What I said to what I've got him doing is waking up with gratitude, and then writing his gratitudes, and then at the end of the day collecting his wins.
Yeah.
Because at the either end of the day, he's recording the fact that I'm doing really well, and what I'm grateful for at the beginning of the day sets me up for not worrying, not living in the future.
Well, when you're in a state of gratitude, you can't have anxiety or worry.
Yeah,
you just can't. You can switch in and out of them quickly. So, but the more what you're doing is rewiring his neural synapses, so he is in a state of gratitude and a state of winning.
Oh, you spotted that, did you?
Oh, which is amazing, because now he's going to win more and have a better life just doing those two things alone. So excellent job.
The interesting thing is he's a great guy and he's doing an excellent job, and he gets validation from the men. The one person that he needed validation from who wasn't giving it to him was his wife, because she's away.
Yeah.
And he's worried about her. So in that situation, it's even more important for him to connect with other men and get into that place of not being in his head and lone wolfing, but actually connecting and getting some real time feedback.
Iron sharpens iron.
Yep.
There's a reason they say that. And yet so many men shy away from being in a group of powerful men work together. When we say powerful, it was interesting. I was trying to clarify this in this last podcast I was on. We're talking about inner power, guys. The power that comes from inside of you. It's not a beat your chest type environment that we foster here. You can leave that at home or just throw it away. So one thing that came to me when we were talking about that. So let's just say you got this guy you're working with. Well, I know you do, but let's just take this guy. He's worried his wife. Is she okay? My guess, there's also the worry is she cheating on me, right? So how does a guy that goes to that space find validation versus the story? You kind of used them interchangeably. So I want to see is there a delineation between those, or do you see them really as the same thing?
The delineation between
creating a story and needing validation.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, I think they're part of the same thing, don't you?
Yeah, well, when you said that, it got me go, okay, where is he needing the validation? I think he would, right? I guess if he felt very secure in the relationship or very secure in himself, he probably wouldn't need to know what his wife was doing. He'd probably say, well, if she's cheating, then the relationship's over.
Yeah.
You know, and it is what it is, rather than worrying about it.
Well, that goes back to being in a secure base situation, having the roots and the groundedness, because as much as it can be painful and difficult, and I've been through a divorce, which was painful and difficult, glad to be out of the marriage, but the divorce process was difficult. The experience of the more grounded I am in myself, the more I'm certain of where I'm going, the more I know that I've got others around me that I can trust their perspective, the more I can be like a seaweed, right? The seaweed has the roots in the ocean, and the waves do this, and the seaweed just goes along with it, doesn't get broken, just stays there. So I think that's really important for men to be self-reliant, and it's a wonderful journey to go on, right? So I can't be knocked off. I was taught when I was doing judo when I was younger, there's a certain stance. You can stand up straight with your legs together and anybody can push you over. You bend your knee slightly and you widen your stance and you're flexible at your hips. Nobody can push you over. And it's the same thing emotionally and energetically. So how in a relationship do you create that stability and flexibility at the same time is through doing the work, right? I don't think there's a shortcut.
There isn't. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I was just thinking of the validation point, seeking validation from women. In that instance, if you weren't grounded, your mind would probably go to, oh, she's gone, she's away, she's not reaching out to me, she's probably sleeping with some guy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Where's her coworkers or whatever that story may build up to. And then to your point of coming full circle back to this topic of needing validation for women, when you've got your validation internally for yourself, those worries seem to just dissipate and go away altogether. I know there was a point in my marriage, in my relationship, where I was deeply doing the work, and I got to a point where, because I'd be that guy that would worry. Well, where is she? Why isn't she getting back to me? What is she doing? What's going on? And start creating stories, right? And those stories never get better. Right? At 2 a.m, the stories just get worse. They
right.
stack more and more and more.
Yeah.
And then when I really felt what I would say is truly secure in myself, like who I am, not the macho. I had the macho version down of like, oh, I'm cool, whatever. Yeah. I felt very good there. But the internal work, the internal security with who I am, as soon as I got that, which was kind of like engaged indifference, it's not that you don't care anymore what happens. You care deeply. Sure. But the idea that would come through my mind is, well, she's going to do what she's going to do. She's her own woman. Hope it doesn't happen, but that's her choice. And there's nothing I can do about that. I'd be at complete peace. Yeah. Because it's kind of what'll be will be. I'm going on my path.
Yeah. So what I've used with my daughter recently was that circle of influence and circle of concern, right? So my circle of influence is here. These are the things that I can affect change in directly. I can do things that make a change or improve my life or help somebody else in this circle. The circle of concern is, we just had the US elections, right? There's interested, concerned, whatever, there may be an impact, but I certainly cannot vote one person in or the other. I cannot affect the change of the water systems in India and making them healthy. So how do I focus on my circle of influence? I can focus on my health, I can focus on my mindset, I can focus on my beliefs, I can focus on my relationships, my agreements, and taking care of all of those things tends to have a ripple effect on the outside anyway. So then the feedback and the validation comes without forcing, right? Because I don't need it, because it's coming because I'm taking care of myself. And it's a strange counterintuitive thing, isn't it? The guys say, if I work on myself, is that me being selfish? And I've had a guy, honestly, just leave the program because he could not stand the amount of feedback he was getting from his wife and his family. She co-opted other family members to say, you're abandoning your family by working on yourself. And he caved. And he admits it. He says to me, I know this is the wrong thing. I just do not see a way around and through that.
Wow.
And it's terrifying for me because I can see exactly where he is. I can see exactly the path that he's on, how he's going to make it worse. And he's just thrown in the towel. And so he said to his wife, well, what you're going to get is more of the same of me, not a better version of me, as long as you're happy with that.
And the children are going to mimic it.
That's what I said to him.
Yeah, the children are going to mimic it. Yeah. That's what scares me. Yeah. When I think of validation, Mark, what I think of is if I'm seeking validation from you, let's just say it's the area of being a good coach, right? What I'm effectively saying is I'm the victim. So I'm effectively saying, Mark, your view of me as a coach is greater and more important than my own view of me, right? So I'm giving you the power. I'm kind of going, here's all my power. Now, whatever you think of me, I'm just going to put that outfit on, put that on myself. We do the same thing with women. Am I good in bed? Am I a good provider? Am I good here? Right? And you're really just saying to the other person, again, the women for this case, I believe you have more power, and your view of me is better than my view of myself.
Yeah.
Thus not being grounded at all. And the only other thing I'll add in here, which is ironic, is men seek validation from women to get women or get the women's attention. The irony is when you stop seeking validation from women, women become attracted to you.
Yeah.
It's the weirdest, like it's the exact opposite of what you think in your head would work, but you become more attractive because you are now a more safe man, a more stable man, and to women, that's sexy.
Mm-hmm. I know
you do. I'm not speaking to you. I'm speaking through you.
So I think that's a really important point, knowing your value.
Yeah.
Right. As a man, as a provider, if you were to do a pros and cons list on yourself, I'm talking to the guys.
Yeah.
Where do I add value? Where am I valuable? What are the aspects of me that assist my family, assist my relationship, my business, my parenting? How do I stack up? And what are my negatives? What are the areas that the gaps? What are the areas that I need to work on? And if you're finding that it's 80-20, why are you focusing on the 20%?
Yeah.
Right? Why are you focusing on the negatives?
Well, that's what you're having this gentleman do at night, right? He's stacking his wins.
Yeah.
Right? And that's going to help him become more grounded.
Yeah.
And not need validation from others, because once he sees how many wins he has. I mean, look, the guys that we work with are mostly business guys.
Yeah.
We're great at finding out what's going wrong in our business so we can fix it.
Yep.
And we do the same things with ourselves. And so instead of doing that, find what's right about yourself.
Yeah.
You can be open. Like nobody listening to this, nobody outside Colton who's actually doing all the production on this is perfect. We all have things to work on. And I think the more you bring those to light, the easier it's going to be. And especially when you talk about seeking validation from women. Man, women find it so, so sexy when a man is grounded and when a man can actually be vulnerable. And vulnerability is a strength, the type of vulnerability that we're talking about here. Not that I'm a victim, but the kind of like, hey, my whole life I've been seeking validation from women. For some reason, I'm actually on an investigation right now trying to figure that out. If you told that to a woman in a very grounded state, that would be the sexiest thing possible.
I have a confession to make. My wife has seen me in tears more than anybody else on this planet.
Oh, I'm sure.
Because I trust her completely. And I've realized, I got to a point where I realized I was holding back and she was pushing me hard because she is who she is. Call her my dragon. She pushed me hard until I eventually thought, well, I can keep on resisting or making excuses or defending, or I can just let go and I can let her in. I'm so glad I did. I'm so glad that I let her in, because she knows everything about me, warts and all. She knows all of my failures and failings and flaws, of which there are only 3, Doug.
Yes.
No, there are lots.
One that you think there is one.
Yeah, exactly. And I've told her all of the times that I failed, how I have judged myself as a father, how I have regretted some of my actions, how I've behaved. I've told her in Technicolor. And most guys are scared of that. I was scared to death of that. And like I said, I'm so glad I did, because at the end of that, the conversation and the end of the sharing, all she does is accept me more.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah. Have you ever seen the movie 8 Mile with Eminem?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So he gets up there, that last rap battle that he goes through, he goes first, and he just spills everything about him.
Yeah.
So when the next guy comes up, he's got nothing to say. He's like, come on. You left. We can do that with our partner or with other people in our lives. They respect you more. You can't just dump your garbage on somebody.
Yeah.
But when you do it in a respectful way where you're sharing parts of yourself, not from a place of like poor me, But from like you were saying, like, you know, Bonnie, your partner, she's seen all those things. You're like, hey, here are my misgivings in these areas.
Yeah.
And she knows it, right? I'm going to guess very little was surprise to her. Maybe some of the stories and feelings. But now she can support you.
Yeah.
And now, you know, you guys are now on this journey together. And that's what every guy wants.
Sure.
He wants a partner. That's why they call it a partner.
Yeah. Perfectly timed, Doug. I was just going to say that in order to create a true partnership, she has to feel like a queen. And for her to feel like a queen, she has to be trusted. In order for her to be trusted, she has to know that she has access to your heart and your emotions and who you really are. She will show up in ways that you never dreamt. I've had guys just deliver clean slate letters and get feedback that they didn't expect because she's gone, finally, you know, I can put this behind me because he's acknowledged all of the things that I've been saying for so many years. You know, I can drop it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what's crazy. You've seen it more than I have, even because working with the guys in the activation method, you know, marriage guys will have divorce papers filed, and all of a sudden, you know, they do clean slate method. They do what we're talking about here. They stop seeking validation. They find it within themselves. And next thing you know, they're having more sex than they've ever had. And their marriage is great. Some guys get married again to their wife, you know, just as a ceremonial, like, hey, this is what I call marriage 2.0.
Yeah.
Right. It's our second shot at it. I got in a phone call on this, Mark, with one of the guy's wives. I'm trying to think of how I could say this without, it's hard, isn't it? Sometimes. So, I got a phone call with one of the guy's wives, and essentially what she told me, and it's a rarity, it was actually a Zoom call, so I could see her face. And she goes, oh, I just want him to be a man.
Yeah.
And this guy is a manly dude. I'm like, you know, but I knew what she was saying. She's like, as soon as he walks in the door, I can feel his energy, and he's looking for validation from me. He's looking to make sure, what's the energy of the house? What does he have to do to make me happy? And I wish he would just be himself and be a man. I was like, ooh, that was very direct. She knew exactly what she wanted, and it gave this guy a great course. Like, you got to fill your cup up first, buddy, and then stop seeking her approval and trying to make her happy. Instead, make yourself happy and find your validation inside you. And he was on that journey and has done really well, and his marriage has turned around.
Yeah.
You know, because women don't want you to be seeking validation in them, because when you do that, you become unsafe.
Well, not only that, you become a burden.
Yeah,
right?
that's
because
true.
she's got to carry you energetically and emotionally.
Yeah, good point.
If you do it for yourself, then she can let go and she can trust it. Okay, he's good. That lightens her load. And I think the essence of a woman being in a relationship with a man who is grounded, is secure in himself, who is on a mission, is not looking for validation from her, is that it gives her the opportunity to see him more clearly as well. Whereas when she's having to feel his burden, that's all she sees. That's what she's going to focus on, is the negative energy. If he removes that, then she can see his other traits, and then she's going to give him the validation that he was looking for in the first place.
Yeah. And to the guy now named the gift, oh, excuse me, not the gift, now named the poet.
Oh, yeah.
He was talking about being the prize versus being the gift. And I think that really is applicable here, because, you know, when you stop seeking the validation, you stop doing that, you do become the gift.
Yeah.
And that's a gift that every woman wants.
Yeah.
Do you think a woman would say, if she was sitting here in the third chair, so to speak, metaphorically, that she would say, if her husband was needy and seeking validation, do you think she would say she was emotionally safe in that relationship?
Zero chance.
I agree. And do you think men want their women to feel safe?
I think a lot of men haven't even considered that, but ultimately, if they knew the concept, yes.
Yeah.
Sure.
I think if we sat here, Mark, and we had another guy in the third chair, and we said, would you defend your wife if someone tried to attack her? Or would you defend her to make her feel safe? My guess is 100% of the guys would say, absolutely. And they would kind of puff up their chest.
Body on the line.
Yeah. But meanwhile, in the confines of their safe home, they have a woman sleeping next to them who does not feel safe.
And it's on them.
100% on them, because they're seeking validation, they're not doing the work, and they're not getting grounded. And I think that's a really important point to drive home to the men. we're thinking, validation. Yeah, I seek validation maybe here or there. The downstream consequences of that, of you being needy and seeking to be needy and not doing work or getting the skills like the activation method without becoming an activated man. That's another word we use internally for grounded. That's why it's the activation method, to get reactivated. They don't realize that they have a woman who they claim to love at their house who is scared because she does not feel safe.
Yep.
And then what's the downstream effects on that in the kids?
Yeah.
There's real consequences here.
So imagine putting yourself in her shoes. You walk in the door, she doesn't feel safe. You're wondering why you're not getting validation and all of the stuff. Well, because you're pulling on her, right?
Yeah.
Tugging at her, look at me, pay attention to me, tell me how great I am, see how big my muscles are, and be impressed with my new vehicle, or, don't you love this business that I've grown, or whatever it is. And she doesn't care. My wife has said to me, if we were living in a cabin having to forage for food, as long as we were together, that would make her happy.
That's awesome.
Nothing else matters.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, and Tim has told this on the podcast, his partner, Amelia, said, I'm with you not because of your business, but despite your business.
Whoa.
Which is also a powerful way of saying, hey, look, I'm with you. Yeah, I think this is such an interesting topic, Mark. I think you're doing such a good job showing the men and role modeling what it is to have that validation within inside of you. As we go through, we've gone all over the place in this conversation, which I love. But if we were to leave these guys with 1 to 2 things that they could do, if they find themselves being a little bit, maybe their wife is telling them they're being needy, or maybe they just kind of know they're always texting her, or trying to find out and where she is, or get affirmation or validation that they're doing a good job. What are 1 or 2 things these guys could do immediately?
Journal, who am I really?
Yeah. Okay.
That would be one for me, is, really look into who am I? And not just now in my relationship, but who am I? Think back to when you're a 6-year-old, 7-year-old little kid. I'm fun, I'm lively, I'm smart, I'm playful, all of these things. And you start figuring out what are your real true characteristics. Maybe, just maybe, there'll be enough evidence there for you to not need so much validation externally. And then another one, which might be quite challenging for me, would be what we were speaking about earlier, which would be coming clean, being vulnerable, and allowing more of yourself to flow in the relationship at the risk of getting judged, at the risk of getting feedback you don't want. Ultimately, that goes to what you were saying earlier, that the better we know ourselves, the more we can provide ourselves with validation.
I love it. Those are 2 great ones. I'm going to add in my 2, which would be do something for yourself. Fill your cup up. And,
I know nothing about that, Doug.
Yeah, I know. We'll work on that. Just so everybody knows, Mark's joking, but I think Mark's won every award we could possibly give on that standard. But filling his cup up and living a truly great life. Like I said, you're a great beacon for men. So fill your cup up. Do something that you like, so you're not always looking for that external thing. Like, do the inward journey. Right. And do stuff that makes you happy. And the second one, I think I would say to the guys, like, hey, if they're on this journey right now and then they're constantly finding themselves seeking validation, I would ask yourself, why? What is it I'm really looking for? Am I looking for, to show that I'm a good enough man, a good enough husband? What area is that validation in? What is missing within inside of you? And then you don't have to go through TPM, guys, but go somewhere where iron will sharpen iron, and you'll get good feedback from another man. I think women can give great feedback too, so I don't want to discount that. My experience has been that there's something different and primal when men get together. Yeah. And you're with men you respect. They're telling you the truth. They're being honest with you, and they've got no skin in the game other than you being better. There's nothing better than that.
I think that's what makes TPM so unique, is that's the environment we create, is men are supported and are respected and given direct feedback and challenged to be better.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing.
No judgment.
Nope.
Yeah. Mark, thank you so much for all you do, man. It is a pleasure.
You, Doug.
It's been great working with you on this trip over the last, 4 years or so, and all the men that you touch and help. Guys literally fly from everywhere just to get a chance to meet you in person. And you did such an amazing job with the Alpha Rising. It was our first kickoff event, and 5-star reviews for the coaching by all the guys. So awesome job, my friend.
And you, Doug, I love how every podcast you refer to and defer to your guest. You're the beacon that brought us here. So thank you.
Well, my pleasure. Gentlemen, as I always say in the moment of insight, take massive action. Go back and look through this. I know we went all over the place, but this is what it is. It's a conversation. And Mark has given you a ton of ideas. Hopefully I've woven in a few of them. Take those down, write which ones resonate with you, right? This is a journey. We have a methodology we call the activation method because it goes step by step. It's harder to do in these podcasts. We're trying to give you everything. I think we've done over 900 podcasts at this point. It's all there for you for free. But if you're looking for a methodology, make sure you go to thepowerfulman.com. Sign up, talk to an advisor, see if it's the right fit for you. We'd love to have you as part of our tribe, but whatever you do, do something. Take action now, whether it be your gratefuls, your wins, or anything else. Maybe do the inward journey that Mark talked about. This is really where it counts, guys. The rubber meets the road. 1% of guys, based on my experience, will actually take action. Are you a 1%er? This is your call out. This is your chance. We'll see you next time on the TPM Show.